Elsie is an action platformer that clearly takes inspiration from classics like Mega Man and Mega Man X. Its colors are vibrant, the music is very upbeat, incorporating a lot of guitar and drums with electronic sounds. The level design and biomes with bosses at the end of those biomes is very reflective of that era. I mean, just listen to this sound when you enter a boss room, it's straight up out of Mega Man. However, Elsie switches it up and incorporates more roguelike elements in this game in the way that you progress. And of course, like roguelikes do, it encourages multiple runs in order to quote-unquote finish the game. Each run making it a little bit further, unlocking different weapons, abilities, and stat boosts, coupled with some partially voice-acted characters. One of those bosses is voice-acted by Shelby from Girlfriend Reviews on YouTube. So, when Playtonic Games reached out to provide a game code to review this game, I was really excited. I love the Mega Man and Mega Man X franchises growing up. Roguelikes have become one of my favorite genres, with the likes of Hades, Risk of Rain 1 and 2, and Dead Cells under my belt already. So taking that concept and putting it in more of a Mega Man style action platformer rather than a Metroidvania style platformer, it was a no-brainer. Sign me up. And Elsie is a fun time, but does it reach the heights of either of those genres, or does it become more of a jack of all trades? That's what we're here for. This is a review of Elsie. Yo, Danny with the DMGT here, your new favorite place for all things music, gaming, and tech. As I mentioned at the start of the video, Playtonics did provide the game code for this review. However, there were no stipulations on what I could talk about in this review besides the review embargo, which is today, September 10th. So these are going to be my raw, honest opinions on this game. The short of it, do I recommend Elsie? I think it's worth a try, especially at the $25 price point. It's very colorful and vibrant, the gameplay is very fast-paced, and the music is very cool. However, for me, and it just might be personal preference, there are some cons in its gameplay, its level design, and the way that you progress that I just took some issue with as I played. I'll provide some specific examples as I go through this review and offer up some alternatives and things that I would have liked to see instead. So let's just get started. Let's kick things off with the gameplay. If you've ever played any Mega Man or Mega Man X game, you're seeing it on screen. It plays exactly like those games do. You shoot a blaster, you can dash, you can wall jump. Mechanically, it's like riding a bike. If you've played those games before, you're going to be really comfortable with the controls to start this game. Still, there are some key differences to the gameplay here that does freshen up that formula a little bit. The first few times that you start a run, the tutorials appear to show you the different abilities that Elsie has, such as parrying, a counter attack, and a dive attack. All of that together makes for some really dynamic gameplay at times. Unfortunately, and I know this is personal preference, but this is where I started to run into some issues. I'm personally not a big fan of the jump mechanic in this game. I feel it's a little bit too floaty for my liking, in particular when you have so much fast-paced action happening at the same time on your screen. And then you jump and it feels a little too floaty. To me, it really dragged down the pace of the gameplay. In particular, when you get deeper into your runs or when you've done enough of them that more complex enemies appear in the opening stages, a lot of things are happening on screen, enemies are coming at you at different speeds, and that jump just feels like it could have been a touch tighter. There's also a minor visual bug in the jump where if you collide with the wall in a certain way, the animation for Elsie doesn't change. It certainly feels a little nitpicky, but I think about the flow of a Hollow Knight or a Metroid. Those extra frames in the air and the way that you move your character definitely makes a difference in the gameplay. Now, after a certain point in Elsie, you do unlock a second playable character, and I do think that mechanic is a little bit better and fine-tuned there, but it's more of a playstyle for that character. That said, the variety that Elsie provides in its gameplay and its abilities is very good. Elsie provides a variety of spells and abilities that you can use and unlock. There's over 150 items that can change your projectiles, the elements associated to those projectiles, what happens when you dash, when you jump, armor sets that provide you with different boosts, and gameplay modifiers. You can opt for higher damage and lower health, or higher health and lower abilities. As you play, scrap metal that you collect can be used to permanently boost Elsie, and then you unlock a cook that gives you temporary boosts to your abilities. There's a ton of variety here to really help you hone in on what your preferred playstyle and different items are going to be for your runs. Speaking of runs, let's talk about the level design before we get into progression. I gotta give Night Shift Games some credit here because the biomes here are really nice and colorful. Each location is unique, they have their own personality and style, and there's enough platforming here to keep you on your toes while you're in combat. Sometimes you'll run into a teleporter that takes you to a bonus level. Think of Sonic when you get to a checkpoint and you have the opportunity to collect a gem. The goal in those rooms are to destroy all the targets, and at the end, if successful, you're rewarded with a boost to your weapon or your abilities. I do think that those rooms could have benefited from like a timer just to make it a touch more challenging, but if you do lose, you do end up losing that little bit of health, so maybe that was a trade-off there. However, while they do say that these levels and rooms are procedurally generated, it does feel more like there were 10 different rooms that are being cycled through for your runs. It's not a huge deal, but it's something that definitely became noticeable, especially because the opening stage doesn't really change. I totally understand that it might be a resource allocation thing, but it definitely started feeling a little familiar where I knew exactly what to do and where to go as I completed more and more runs. And yeah, as I completed runs, that's plural because you only really play 3 stages in each run. The opening biome, which then has a boss at the end, a second biome from there that has another boss at the end, and then a third biome that has its final third boss at the end. This might be my biggest gripe with Elsie. As you get deeper into your runs and as you do more of them, you unlock different abilities, different levels, and you defeat different bosses. However, no matter what, at the end of that third stage, that third level, it kicks you right back to the beginning no matter how well your run is going. At first, I didn't really understand what was going on. Elsie mentioned that she hits a dead end and the doctor tells you to come back to the base. And the first time I encountered that, I was a little confused. I thought going back to the base would mean that there was another story beat that I have to go through or unlock a different section of the base. Nope, that's just the limitation of the run, and normally that'd be okay, but the game doesn't do a particularly good job of telling you that's exactly what happened and it's time to get back into it. And while that definitely helps with the replayability of the game because then you have to start a new run to progress further, it's a little frustrating when you're having a good run and the game says, nope, this is it, this is where you stop, even though there are still other things to unlock. There are still new biomes and new bosses that you have to defeat. Whereas a game like Hades gives you additional story beats when you get to the end of a section, you don't normally have to fight a same boss over again. Or a game like Risk of Rain, it just loops you back to the start, but it modifies that a little bit so you continue your run and you push the limits as far as you can go. Basically, the runs end when you can no longer keep going and keep fighting the enemies. So because of that, Elsie feels like it doesn't commit all the way to a roguelike, but also didn't really commit all the way to a classic stage select like Mega Man does. And usually I could live with that, but you're forced into starting at that same biome every single time no matter your run. And because of that, especially that opening section of the game, as you unlock more abilities and more equipable items, Elsie becomes unstoppable. You basically can't lose, and by the time you get to a boss fight at the end of these runs, I was speeding through and melting them. It felt like it wasn't even a challenge. Which brings me to my last point on progression. It just feels like this game needs a little bit more balancing. Look, in games like these, I think everyone has a particular biome or level that they just struggle with no matter what, and it's sometimes different for everybody. And for me, it was the Circuit City biome. That one drives me up a wall. This biome has a ton of enemies on screen at the same time, but even worse, enemies that you can't see at all are shooting attacks at you, and it's very difficult to identify who you need to prioritize first in the level. Action platformers like Mega Man typically do a pretty good job of showing you exactly what's going to happen before you get yourself into danger. Circuit City? Nah, we're gonna put 5 spiders at the top of the room that you can't see, and you're just gonna be constantly bombarded with electric web things that you don't know where they're coming from while you're fighting the other enemies in the room that you can see. I lost way more runs to rooms like this than any boss fight in Elsie. So combine that, being overwhelmed in rooms that have a bunch of mobs or enemies that you can't see, and then you're melting bosses, it definitely felt like some balancing definitely needs to be adjusted as you progress. Look, I don't want to sound like I'm just dunking on this game. I did enjoy my time with Elsie, and I hope that this feedback is a little bit more constructive than just completely saying it's not a good game, because I did have fun playing Elsie. And while the progression was a little bit frustrating, and I do appreciate that the runs are relatively short, you can complete a run in 10 to 20 minutes depending on how fast you're playing and how comfortable you are with the controls. At $25, I think it's definitely worth a try, even if you're on the fence. I'm a big fan of indie developers and supporting smaller game studios, so even if it's not the game of the year, it doesn't need to be. I think it's a fun enough and entertaining time that you should check out Elsie. Elsie gets a 3 out of 5. Let us know what you think. Are you going to pick up Elsie? Is this a game that you're interested in? Thank you again to Platonics for sending us a review code of this game. This is actually our first time getting a review copy of a game, and yeah, it's really exciting. I was very happy that they reached out. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. Once again, I'm Danny with the DMGT. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.